There is a stretch of water, barely 33 kilometers wide at its narrowest point, that determines the price of cooking gas in Mumbai, the cost of fertilizers in Punjab, and stability of the Indian rupee. It is called the Strait of Hormuz, and in the year since October 2023, the conflict between Iran and Israel, a conflict rooted in decades of hostility, proxy warfare, and nuclear anxiety, has placed that strait and India's economic future under a cloud of uncertainty. India is not a combatant in this war. It has no soldiers on the ground, no missiles in the air, and yet the economic consequences of this geopolitical storm land quietly but heavily on 1.4 billion citizens of India. This is the story of how a war in West Asia reshapes economic policy making in New Delhi. To understand today, we must look back. In 1973, the Arab oil embargo sent shockwaves through the global economy, and India, already dependent on imported crude, was left scrambling. Oil prices quadrupled overnight. Inflation surged. The government was forced into painful austerity. Decades later, in 1990, Iraq's invasion of Kuwait triggered another oil shock. India's foreign exchange reserves fell to just 2 weeks' worth of import cover. The crisis forced New Delhi to pledge its gold reserves to the IMF, a moment of national economic humiliation that directly led to the landmark liberalization reforms of 1991. Then came the Iran sanctions of 2012 and 18, when the United States pressured India to cut off one of its largest oil suppliers. India complied, losing access to discounted Iranian crude oil, and scrambled to diversify its energy sources. History has a pattern. Every major conflict in West Asia sends an economic tremor through India. And today, that tremor is back, larger than before. Here is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of India's vulnerability. India imports over 85% of its crude oil, nearly 45% of it from Middle Eastern nations. Nearly half of its liquefied natural gas flows from Qatar alone. When the Iran Israel conflict escalated in June 2025, crude futures spiked 20% in 2 weeks. An oil price above $80 per barrel could add $4 to $6 billion to India's already strained energy subsidy bill of $24 billion for the year. The Red Sea, India's critical export corridor, has been under the Houthi attack. Freight costs have surged. Agriculture exports, sending $11.8 billion worth of goods to West Asia, face mounting delays and penalties. Then there are remittances. 9 million Indians work in the Gulf. In 2025, they sent home over $50 billion. As conflict spreads, those flows are at risk. And so is the rupee, which has already weakened to 86 to the dollar. India's Goldilocks moment. High growth, low inflation is under serious threat. The challenge for Indian policymakers is not ignorance of the problem, it is the complexity of the solution. India walks a diplomatic tightrope. It has strong ties with both Iran and Israel and cannot afford to alienate either or the United States or Russia, from whom it buys discounted oil that travels through the same contested sea routes. India's doctrine of strategic autonomy means it refuses to take sides. But in a world of escalating great power competition, neutrality has a price. Domestically, weaning India of fossil fuels is a long term project. In the short run, the government is trapped. Subsidize citizens from fuel shocks and blow the fiscal deficit, or don't, and face political consequences. Simply put, India's options are constrained by geography, diplomacy, and the pace of its energy transition. Crisis has always been India's most efficient teacher, but this time India cannot afford to wait for the lesson to be over. The response must unfold in three clear phases. The first, India must activate its strategic petroleum reserves, fast track the approved facilities at Chandikhol and Padur, and issue force majeure declarations to shield exporters from Red Sea disruption penalties. Diplomatic missions to GCC nations must prioritize the safety of 9 million Indian workers and the protection of remittance flows. In the medium term, 1 to 3 years, India must diversify its crude suppliers, pulling the Middle East share below 35% by deepening its ties with the United States, Brazil, and Africa. GCC trade agreements under negotiation must be accelerated, and the Reserve Bank of India must establish a formal remittance protection fund for Gulf dependent families. In the long term, 5 to 10 years, the answer is structural. India's green hydrogen mission targets 5 million metric tons by 2030. The solar capacity must be scaled decisively, and India's doctrine of strategic autonomy must evolve. Not abandoned, but sharpened. So New Delhi can act in its own economic interest even when the geopolitical weather turns. The 1991 reforms proved that the crisis can catalyze transformation. The question today is not whether India will act, it is whether India will act in time. The Strait of Hormuz is 33 kilometers wide, but it stretches all the way to India, its policy, rooms, its petrol pumps, and its people. In globalized world, no economy is an island. For India, navigating geopolitical storms is not just a foreign policy skill. It's an economic imperative. I'm Vineet Pawar.